Hello people of YouTube, my name is Brad. This is my channel Animate Orange and welcome to the review video for the Wild West Gatling gun. I have it finished and completed right here. We're going to take a bit of time to talk about this model and this build and what my thoughts and feelings are on this model. And to start with, looking at this model, I was pretty excited about doing it. It is a neat looking model. I don't know how to explain it, but I kind of enjoy the aesthetics and the look of the older artillery stuff. These big wagon wheel type wheels, this bronze or copper looking gun sitting on top. I don't know any of the technical details, honestly, but it is pretty neat looking. Looks like it can be hitched up to the back of, I'm guessing, maybe a horse or some sort of apparatus to tow it to where it needs to be. It's just a really neat looking and really nice that it's in color. Nice looking model, and I thought it would be a lot of fun to build. Opening up, taking a look at it, it looked like it was going to be a fairly easy build. Maybe not easy, but not as complicated as some of the builds that I've been doing recently. I continuously name the latest Star Wars models as being challenging models because they have been. But I thought this would be something nice and easier to do and get through with it quickly, because while I do appreciate the challenging models, I like to mix them up with simpler models. So that's what I was expecting with this build. It comes with one full-size metal sheet and two small sheets, which I just assumed were detailed bits. It looked like it had rather large parts in it. I didn't think that much of it. I did expect some complexity, and starting off, you begin building these wheels, and they look at first pretty simple, but there is some complexity to it. Each wheel has, I think it's 8 different pieces, and yes, this is kind of wobbly. This one doesn't want to sit still. It has 8 different pieces that form 2 of the spokes. Each piece is 2 spokes. Adds a lot of thickness and detail to it. I think that's fantastic. More than willing to go that extra work and add those pieces in. However, the one downside to it is there's only one side of the pieces that go inside. Only one side of those is painted. The other side is silver. So you're folding them in kind of almost in half, not quite, to make up 2 spokes each one. If you look at it from one side, you can see about half of the spokes have color. If you look at it at an angle, you can see about half of the spokes seem to have color and the other half are silver. And it kind of throws it off a little. Why they weren't painted on both sides, I don't know, but I would think that would have improved the final look of it, because you can see a lot of silver strips if you look at it from the right angle. So as far as the complexity of it, having to put all those different pieces in there, I'm all for it. It really makes the wheels look a lot more 3D, a lot better. But the fact that only one side was painted and the other side was silver, I'm pretty disappointed in that. And that somewhat sets the tone. I didn't know it yet, but that somewhat set the tone of the rest of the build. Next up, we start building this main structure, this long beam and then the cross beam. And it had some odd attachments and bits to it, just stuff I didn't expect. The way the rear of this is actually a separate flap on either side to do the curve piece on the sides, and you have this sort of handle type bit on either side, and those are part 12, and they're not really complicated to fold, a little bit odd, but it was challenging to get those parts on because one side goes on the more solid area and the other side goes on this back piece. One side is piece 10, the other side is piece 11. They both attach with 2 side-by-side folded over tabs, but it doesn't hold them really sturdy. The handle helps that, but trying to get flimsy piece together with a flopping piece was challenging, a little bit frustrating. Why they chose to have that as a separate piece, I have no idea, but that's the way it is. Not a big deal, but it just kind of added to some of the why do they do it that way sort of feeling to it. Some other small detailed bits, not unexpected. We get to working on this front cross member here, and we get into some unusual things, some things that didn't want to work out quite right. And actually, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, because you put this bottom piece on for this long tail section, and it has these 2 support arms. And it's at first I missed that they have to fold in half, both the long beam and then there's a little end piece. Both have to fold over in half because one side's painted, one side's not. But because they fold over, it covers that up fine. A little challenging to fold this thin bit in half, but I managed. But it's not particularly clear what to do with the end. It just kind of hangs out there under these boxes, which you put on later. And I wasn't sure if they're supposed to attach, where they're supposed to position. They just pretty much just are there. And in the end, they hide under these boxes, which are like the last things you put on in the build. But they also get in the way a little bit. I got it stuck under another piece and it wouldn't sit flat, and I didn't know what was going on. Just the vagueness of it, the fact that this is done weirdly, the fact that it's only painted on one side, and you can see the silver in the wheels, and then the vagueness of what to do with those was starting to frustrate me a little bit. But then we get onto this front beam, and we have, you can see these dark brown bits, which I'm guessing are supposed to be representative of some wood, or maybe a strap, something to hold this thing together. I'm not that familiar with Gatling guns, but it's a two-dimensional shape. It's not just a flat strip, and it comes together in, each one comes together in two separate pieces to form it. That's 4 altogether. Now those two sort of strap beam things there are made up of parts 18 and 19. I believe it's 18 is the shorter bit and the 19 is the longer bit that sticks on one side and folds over. This whole beam was awkward to fold down evenly, and then you have to fold the one side, I think it's 19, over onto 18 and connect a tab, and they did not want to sit flat, and I don't know why. It was the same for both of them. And even now, if you look through the spokes, you can kind of see that they're angled down rather than sitting flat across the bottom. It doesn't stand out, fortunately, because it's between the wheels, and the only way to see it is to stare through these spokes at the side to really make it out. I fought with those trying to get it to go flat. It wouldn't go flat. It just barely enough of a tab goes through it to hold it down. The frustrating little bits about this are starting to mount. Then we move on to assembling the actual gun piece and this structure underneath that holds it. One of the things that another thing that confused me is this bit back here that sticks out kind of long. Part of it is painted black while the rest of it is this sort of gold color. And the instructions seem to indicate that the black part is actually folded inside so you don't really see it. And I tried to look at the 360 view and I couldn't find it, and I wasn't real sure what to do with it, so I just followed the instructions and folded it so that all you see here is complete gold colored bit sticking out. And that's part 24, by the way, that I'm talking about. Now that I've looked a little more closely at the pictures, it looks like that maybe that black part was supposed to be showing on the outside. I'm not real sure if I've gotten that right or wrong, but there it is. Another little challenging part, so long and thin to fold up, but I did it, and I may have done it backwards because the instructions seem to indicate that the engraved side goes inside. Maybe I misunderstood and it goes on the outside. I'm not real sure. It's a little bit, again, a little bit hazy how I'm supposed to interpret that, and I ran into some more issues with which way the engraved side is supposed to face, but I blame myself for the next part we'll talk about here in a moment. This little bit under here, not too challenging to do. It's kind of an odd shape, but it's easy to understand, easy to come together. We have what I'm guessing is the magazine up here that I didn't really have a problem putting that together, but there's a little piece on the bottom, a little half circle piece that goes underneath it, and then that is how it attaches to the rest of the gun, and that's the other piece that I got confused about which way to face the engraved side. And that's part 39 that holds the two together, and it's again half curved piece, and it said the engraved side faces up, and I mistook, this is all on me, I mistook the fold lines, which because it's a curved piece there's an array of fold lines to help you curve it. I faced those up and then went to put it on, and you can see the edges of it stick out, so you can see that engraving, and I'm like, that doesn't look right, so I ended up flipping that over. That was a mistake I made, misinterpreting something that I try to comment at the beginning of videos when I'm going over the instructions. When it says engraved side, you have to be careful not to get engraving confused with fold lines, and I've done that before, and sometimes that's really easy to do, is to think, oh, this is engraving, it goes up. Now those are fold lines. It's not always as obvious. That one's a little one, that one's on me, so I really can't blame the model on that or the instructions on that. We do have some tiny little parts as we're putting the mount together to attach it to the rest of this frame. There's a little plate in there that has 4 little, what I'm guessing are supposed to represent big bolts that hold it on. It's 4 two-part assemblies. It consists of 42 and 43 times 4. A little bit finicky to put together. I put a little focus on that on the build video because the bottom part is rounded, and you can only do so much rounding with that while attaching the top part. I didn't fold the flap down until I'd attached it to this base, secured the tabs, which have to be folded over, by the way, because it's so narrow you can't twist them, and then touched up the little curves a little bit, then folded the top down. Again, not very complicated, but by this point I've dealt with so many little tedious things, with difficult things to fold and difficult things to shape that take a little extra time, some misunderstandings and lack of clarity on things, that it's really slowed the build down by this point. It ended up the build taking a lot longer than expected, not because of a great number of parts, not because things are overly complicated, but just because so many of the things take more interpretation, more fiddling to get them done. But once I got past those bolts and got that attached and ready to go and on the thing, no big deal. We move on to these two boxes right here. One box, again, no big deal. The other box was quite a frustrating ordeal. We have this box on this side that has straps that go across the top. There's two of them that go across the top, and they were a pain. Actually, they're better visible over here. It goes up the side and across the top. There's two of them. They're both part of 49, and they have 3 slots along the edge of the strip. 2 on one side, 1 on the other. Those slots have to be bent as close to the edge as you possibly can, which is quite challenging to do since that part is so thin. It's difficult to fold one thin bit down while not folding the other thin bit, and it's easy to warp it. I struggled with that. I went about it wrong in the first place, and I didn't fold them as cleanly as I needed to, and when it came time to attach the first one to the box, the slots didn't line up and the piece was all wonky, and I fought with trying to straighten the tabs out and fold them over again the second time. Really had difficult with the first one of those 2 parts that I put together, and thought I mostly got it, but if you look at it right, you can see one of the tabs is kind of slid out of place on the back. The other one I was a little more prepared to fold it correctly. Still had a little trouble, but I approached it in a better way by holding the part itself with like flat nose tweezers and pushing the tab over with my back of my thumbnail really hard to get that as tight a fold as possible. So the second one I did came on easier, but again, it was just frustrating little bits that didn't want to work out. Part of it, one of those situations where I felt like the model was working against me, but part of it was just some of the design aspects. I kind of questioned if maybe that was the best way to go about it. Now, I don't design these models, so I try not to be critical of how things are designed, but the need to have a separate piece back here instead of just making this whole thing one solid piece and more solid. The way that these are designed on the bottom to fold over, and they don't fold over evenly, the lack of clarity about which way the black side is supposed to go on the strip that sticks out, the fact that the tabs are offset and on a very difficult part to fold over, why they couldn't just, since it angles over the back, why the tabs couldn't just be put on the same side so that even if you do get a little offset, it sits straight. Just more opportunity to be able to put it together correctly the first time. There's just a number of things about this model that I wonder if it could have been designed better, and it caused me a lot of frustration that made me not enjoy this model as much as I'd hoped, and made it take a lot longer than I thought it should. One more thing I almost skipped is this little bit on the side here, and it's only held on by 1 tab. And that is part 37. 1 tab. There's so much opportunity for that to go wrong and fall back off. I did my best to twist that tab tightly. Of course, shortly after putting that on, I'm moving the model around trying to get things in, and it eventually twisted and popped out, because even though you've twisted the tabs, you basically created a screw that it could unscrew and fall out, and it did, and I just put it on the side until the end. When the model was done, I screwed it back into place, a drop of super glue, and now it's holding in. But those little bits frustrate me too. And back to that box, when I did go to put this box on, the bottom tabs, there's 2 tabs front and back that hold it on. I normally would have folded those over. Because I fiddled with this one box so much, it kind of flexed it a little bit. When I tried to bend the tab over, the whole box tried to tilt instead of bending the tab. I'm not playing with that. I'm not breaking something off and getting something warped, so I just twisted them. Ended up doing the same for this one over here. I didn't stress the connections as much, but I didn't want to take the chance. So I've kind of gone over the bad about this model. There are absolutely some frustrating parts. After watching this video, if you go to build this model, maybe you won't have as much difficulty. I know some of the other people that I've talked to online had similar difficulties, had some frustrating encounters with this particular model, so it's not just me. Purpose of me going over these bad things is to try and warn you so you can be more prepared. If you do this model, you'll be more prepared to do it more successfully and possibly a little bit quicker if time is even a concern for you. If doing it slowly and doing it right is, then there you go. You've got some tips to approach it better from the start. It is a really nice looking model, and I'm glad to have it in my collection. I'm glad to finally be done with it. But it was a lot more frustrating build than I initially hoped for. Now, my opinion of it might be a little bit jaded because I expected it to be a simpler build, and it was not. I would not call this a challenging build. It just has some challenging and frustrating parts, which make what normally would be a somewhat quick medium build be a somewhat long medium build, at least for me. So I still qualify this in the medium category, which I hadn't even looked, is about what it says on the back. It kind of has it about halfway between easy and hard. So it's in the medium category. I definitely keep it there. Just some of the things, there's just some things I'm disappointed about how it comes together, namely these spokes, silver on one side, and some things that were maybe a little more frustrating than they needed to be. But you do end up with a fantastic model. It's not something that I'd say stay away from. It's definitely something, if you're into the Wild West collection, go ahead and do it, but be a little prepared. I did have to take some time to calm down after the build because I was pretty frustrated with it, to the point of hitting my tools down kind of heavy and hitting stop on my camera and going taking a break. I did take a little bit more of breaks, frequent breaks with this model than I normally would, just because I needed it to not get mad at it. If you've been mad at a model because it's not working out, you completely understand. I don't have to explain that. I had to take a little bit more breaks than usual, but in the end, now that we're several days later and I'm doing the review, yes, I still have these things that I can complain about, but I'm still happy with the end result, and I still would recommend this model. It is really cool looking, and I am very much looking forward to some of the other Wild West models that they have. I have one of the train sets that I do eventually want to do. How this compares to the other Wild West model, the Stagecoach, that's an interesting question. The Stagecoach definitely had its frustrating parts, but definitely ends up with a fantastic result. I feel like the Stagecoach took a little bit longer, but looking at it, I kind of could have guessed that. This is very similar in that it had some difficult parts, but I wouldn't really consider it challenging, though. To look at it, it took longer than I expected, and that really drug me down when I finally did the time. And when it took this long, we'd have thought it would have gotten done a little bit faster than that. Now, how long did it take? This model took 3 hours and 30 minutes to put together, and I find it interesting to open this model up to look at it, look at these metal sheets, only one full-size sheet, a couple of, I think, quarter sheets, and one piece of paper for instructions. I would not have guessed this as being a 3.5 hour model. I would have guessed it as being more of a 2 hour model or less. It's not because it's got a lot of parts to it. It's not that it has a lot of small parts to it. It's just some fiddly areas that really slow you down. Now, please don't let this discourage you from wanting to build this model. I am being a little hard on it because it frustrated me, and possibly because I came into this thinking this was going to be a 2 hour build. I'd be done with it in no time, probably even less than 2 hours, and I can maybe even build 2 models in one sitting, and that's absolutely not what happened. I took quite a few breaks during this because I got frustrated. But it isn't really that challenging of a model, just a bit fiddly. So please don't let this video discourage you from giving it a try. It is a fantastic looking model. It absolutely can be done. It's going to be a little bit fiddly in areas, and hopefully after watching this video, you'll be able to look out for some of those difficult parts and fare better than I did. End up with a quicker and better result than me. Not that everybody's going to be worried about time, but please don't let this video discourage you. I'm just giving you the difficulties that I ran through. It still has a lot of wow to it. Can't believe I just said that. It is a really cool looking model. I really love the look of this, and this is one of the Wild West models I've been looking forward to building. I was just hoping it was going to be shorter and maybe a little bitter than it wasn't, and a little bit bitter that some of the things didn't cooperate. In the end, fantastic model. Sure, I could nitpick a few things that maybe they could have designed differently, but it's not like Fast Station did a bad job on designing this model. Just a few things to nitpick on. It is still a gorgeous looking model when it is done. Now, of course, if you want more details about the build, I do have a two-part build video on this model, so you can go see the trouble I had and how I overcame it, and get more about the build itself. The intention of this is just to be a fairly quick review, even though I've rambled on for several minutes now. I am, however, going to leave it at that. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. I will do my best to get back to you with your comments. If nothing else, a like or a thumbs up or whatever to tell you I've read it. I do try to keep up with the comments, so it gets a little overwhelming sometimes because of everything else going on in life, but know that I at least try to read everything and get back to appropriate things. So feel free to leave your comments down below. Thank you to those of you who do interact and comment on these videos. I do appreciate the feedback. As always, thank you to my Patreon supporters for continuing to support this channel. This was a review, or not a review model, this was a requested model that took me a while to get to. I'm starting to get through the list. It's been backed up for a while now. There's a link in the description that I usually include to a Word document or sheet that has the models that have been requested and what the status is on them. I try to keep up with that. If you've requested a model and you don't see in that list, remind me in the comments down below and I'll add it, because I may have forgotten to add a request when I saw it. I'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching. As always, keep on keeping on.